Zygon?
How's it going, guys? It's Zygon. I wanted to walk you through my new plugin called SingleGrain. We'll go through how it works, different ways to use it, how I use it, different ways to experiment with it, and really find new sounds and use sounds in a unique and creative way. This is SingleGrain. But before you can understand SingleGrain, you kind of have to understand granular synthesis. And so I'll explain a brief overview. If you really want to deep dive, feel free. It's super cool. But we'll start off first. You just have a grain. And so you're going to always be working with samples within granular synthesis because you need to make that grain out of the sample. You will choose a slice of the sample and that will act as your grain. Now you can play multiple grains at once and space them, spread them, distort them, and that's how Granulator works in Ableton. And so that kind of changes the timbre of the sound a little more than I like for my tastes. So I went ahead and developed SingleGrain. What SingleGrain does is a lot of the same functionality on the surface, but when you dive in, it allows you to retain the quality of your sound and while still morphing it in very unique and interesting ways. The first thing you're going to need to do when you open SingleGrain is choose a sample. And so here I have just my sample library. You can drag it in from wherever you would like. I know that this sample loads in quiet. But if we use this norm button down here, that will normalize the sample volume. Now you see it increased our amplitude. That means if we then go back and mess with our amplitude in automation or anything like that, we can always just renormalize. The other thing you're allowed to do is choose. So say I like this particular sound right here. I can put the position there and shorten the length. Let's do this. And so this is a good point to make. You see how it is jumping. If you hold shift, we can get those fine tune adjustments. So we'll fine tune adjustment to maybe there. And now when I click trim, it will trim your sample down to just that size. And so that allows you to really work with samples a lot easier. And that's just in general how you're going to load and shape your sample. Now we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of SingleGrain, the big knobs. First off, we have attack and decay. I've mapped this bottom macro to both of them so we can hear it together. As I turn it up, you hear that attack and decay start to happen and chop off or clean up the ends of the grain repetition. This is extremely effective in certain scenarios, and I'll go over those in just a little bit. Next, we have the grain controls. The two main things you're going to care about for your grain are your position and your length, at least in SingleGrain. Your length is, as it says, the length of your grain. I can increase it or hold shift to do fine tune changes for any of the knobs. Hold shift to do fine tune. I can also move this position as well. You can see what's happening there. But the unique thing with SingleGrain is if I turn on this sync mode, now it's synced. It will force the grain repetition based on the timing of your quarter note. And so what that allows you to do is do changes with your speed or whatever you want in the middle of the grain and know it is going to repeat on time. So here you can see we're going to repeat on, let's make it the half note just so we can mess with it a little. And if I go to mess with this speed, it will always repeat on the half note, no matter what the speed is doing. Next, we have our shift knob. Now, there's multiple ways to use the shift knob. You can have pitch, frequency, and variations of both. So pitch 1 will only go up one semitone, pitch 12, 12, 24, 24. Frequency 500 does 500 hertz, plus and minus. Now, frequency and pitch are different. The pitch algorithm will try to retain the overall pitch when you're shifting by semitones. Frequency will do a flat frequency shift, and so they give both different timbres. So that's frequency 500, 2000, 5000, and then pitch 1, pitch 12. So you can hear there are similarities, but they are not the same. I suggest playing with both of them. Experiment a little. It's all about making fun sounds. For the last big knob, we have amplitude. This is, as it says, the amplitude of the wave. You can see as I move this amplitude, you can see the visual representation of the amplitude on the wave. There is a slight compressor if you go over, so we don't clip at all. But this allows you to handle any artifacts that you might run into. Attack and decay will handle those grain repetitions, but amplitude can be automated to cut out artifacts anywhere they might be, or use the amplitude to help give your sound an extra flow, an extra push. A lot of the cool features that are in SingleGrain came from me just playing around with it and thinking, what would be useful here? How could I do something different to make a cool sound? One of those things is lock position. It lets you handle the reverse in two unique ways. We have lock position on and lock position off. With lock position off, it will start the grain from the end when you're going in reverse. So an example where this is useful is a slowdown like this. So you can see we slowed down to a stop, then reversed. But since we're reversing, now to keep this continuous, we have to start from the end of the grain. And so starting from the end of the grain, we get to retain the same sound quality, but in reverse. The problem is, if we now sync this and then change the speed, the end of our grain will change as well. Because when you slow something down, it's going to take a longer time to go over that same area. And so when we want our timing to be synced, the speed will adjust our actual grain length. But if we do lock position, then this does not matter. Our reverse start point will always be at the gray position bar. And so this allows you to, if you just wanted to reverse a sound, that's how you would use lock position. Next, we are going to get into the automation. You have 3 LFOs to use, LFO 1, 2, and 3. You can see your active LFO by which one is red. On your LFO shape itself, this red dot is your start and end point. They're always the same value. This yellow dot allows you to change interpolation between points. Double clicking, you can add a dot. Right click, you can delete a dot. And so we can use this to do things like draw this quarter note pattern, and then we will click and drag the LFO onto whatever we would like to automate. So let's do speed, for example, and we can use this tiny knob to mess with the depth. So here we can slow it down on a quarter note, and we'll listen to that. And you can hear it's starting anytime we press a note, and it's repeating on the division. If we hit envelope, it will play once and then stay at the red dot value after the LFO has completed. Off, it will just always be cycling based on the division. If you would like to do hertz, you can always hit this sync off and then mess with hertz. That's very useful in certain scenarios. And so we'll leave this sync on. And you can hear, because we have this sync on and we are set at 1/8, it will repeat on our 1/8 no matter what we're doing with speed. So then if I go and play the whole project, you can hear how you can stay on time, but give it that nice wonky feeling and just unique vibe. So here you can see we can go up and down in our automation, but if we use control click, so I'm holding control, clicking the knob, that will change our direction of automation. Now you see, now this went from 0 to 100 instead of split in the middle. That's because this has even directions on both sides of the knob. So you're just measuring your total distance and then multiplying that by 2 for your knob. If I hold control, click and drag, you can see that knob going up, but the automation itself is not changing. What we're doing is essentially zooming in on the automation. There's a lot of cases where you're only going to want to be doing the slightest bit of automation. And so by using this automation zoom, now this knob handles that small area, but I can go from 0 to 100 and get much more fine-tuned automation depths. Now, if you wanted to change your automation depth over time, we can also do that. You need to click and drag an unactive LFO. So this gray LFO, I'm going to click and drag to here. And then let's go to this LFO, set the division over a longer time. We can go here and say the log fall. And now we will see this automation depth be automated itself. So let's listen to that. So that's how you can create really evolving sounds. I encourage you to go through a lot of the presets I made, any of the ones labeled Zygon, and you'll be able to find some really unique evolving sounds using that automation depth automation. For our global controls, you have these macros down here at the bottom, but you also have this matrix. What this is showing is just the numbers and sliders for everything that I showed you the hotkeys for on the front. So you can say set LFO 3 as the source, automation depth 50%, and set it to whatever you would like. So say I'll do length, and then you can also automate the depth of this using this depth source. And so if I used LFO 2 on this one as well, it will automate that depth in the same way it did the other one. Here, the fine controls, this is our zoom. Notice when I go down, it does not change, but once the zoom zooms in too far, it will crush that original depth and truncate the value. So if I go super low and then go back up, we've now lost our automation. It's just a thing to consider. For the sample, LFO shape, and preset, you can save all three. So if I wanted to save the LFO shape, I can save it there. And when you save it, you will see it in down here in user stuff, and you'll be able to find it and load it in just like any other LFO shape. For a sample, If you drag a sample in, so say I drag this sample in and click Save Sample, now this will open up the Explorer to allow you to save wherever you would like. If I hit Save here, same thing for the preset. You can hit Init to just get an initial preset. Just delete everything. It will keep the sample, but reset all the knobs and automation. So we're going to do something fun where we will set this to maybe a half. We'll set this to, we'll automate the speed. Now we're going to go over the record button. This allows you to arm the recording and record the plugin output back in as the sample. So here I have this speed automated. If I just hit the note press, now we can either save the samples or replace current sample. We'll replace it, and this can be a rabbit hole because you can do it again. And do it again. And now let's get rid of the automation. Just some fun, weird sounds. Here, I have a number of different examples, and all of these are presets that come with SingleGrain. There's over 120 unique presets for you to explore and really see how they work and see what you can do with SingleGrain. This is a riser. Pretty simple, but if we hit this invert now, it's a downlifter. Using a combination of speed and length controls can really help bring some character to your risers. Here is a perfect example. So you can hear as we're going faster, we're also shortening the grain. So that combination of the speeding up and the grain shortening helps give that rising energy. This one's for all my rhythm fans out there. Like I was saying earlier, the sync allows you to stay on time, but use that speed control. This is an example. And if we wanted to, we could add some more evolving LFOs to help give character throughout the sound. This is an example of one of those evolving sounds. And so you can hear we still have our quarter note speed happening, but we also have this evolving LFO. This is an example of using the lock position. This is an example of how attack and decay can be effective. So without any attack or decay, but when we bring it in, helps really clean up the sound. This is an example of one of the other unique SingleGrain benefits. When you're handling a sample with a full frequency range, in other words, a one shot or a loop that already has a sub baked in, when you control the speed, it will affect the sub in a way that keeps everything very cohesive. So here, you can hear as that sample is being slowed down, the sub is starting to lower as well. So we keep that cohesive vibe. You're also able to do these controls on subs themselves. Here you can see I synced the length so we stay on time, but since I'm changing the speed, you can see the grain change, the grain visual part changing. This doesn't matter, it'll still repeat on the synced time. But what this allows you to do is that speed control and give your sub an extra flow. Now, one idea I had, but I don't have the experience to implement correctly, is scratching. The playhead will always continue playing when you change the speed. If you are unsynced, you can do automated scratching. And so I challenge you viewers, please send me some scratching presets. SingleGrain is for sale at the link in my bio. This is still under development. I am completely open to any feedback. Feel free to email me at christian@higherchristianalexander.com. I would love to add any of your ideas. I would love to hear your presets and just make some music with you guys. Let's have some fun.